Rise and shine, viewer, rise and shine. The Half-Life 2 beta was home to many pretty incredible game mechanics and storytelling devices that sadly did not make it into the retail game. While the stories of each were fairly similar, there were some major changes in plot points and how our favourite crowbar-wielding maniac navigated a Combine-controlled planet Earth. One of the biggest obstacles for Valve was how they explained what had happened between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. There were many attempts to do this, and in this video, we are going to explore one of them. Thanks to the Half-Life 2 Bible, Raising the Bar, we have access to scripts that sadly never became a reality. One of these cut moments in the Half-Life 2 storyline would have given us, the player, a first-hand view on what occurred before, during, and after the 7-hour war, a brutal invasion that showed the dark and gritty nature, I'm sorry I had to say it, of the Combine, and how the scared population reacted. In this video, we explore the lore and the story behind the cut slideshow briefing in Half-Life 2. The death of the Nylanth was a complete victory for not only those who had survived the Black Mesa incident, but also for the entity known as the G-Man. He and his employers had hoped Gordon would complete this task for them, and with this success, the G-Man offered Gordon a choice: survival or a fight he had no chance of winning. To survive, Dr. Freeman was offered access to a green portal, in which he stepped into. To Gordon, his experience in this timeless void felt like seconds. However, when the G-Man came back for him, it had actually been a decade. It was his time to rise and shine, to smell the ashes. Mere moments before to Gordon, he had fought with the Nylanth, and by some ability of the G-Man, he found himself on a train entering a city. The people here wore masks to survive what appeared to be heavy pollution. They also wore identical uniforms like those in a prison, and the population appeared to be heavily controlled and monitored from patrol units, cameras, and advanced technology completely alien to what he had known. This was the situation every player that had loaded up Half-Life 2 experienced. In the beta, there were adjustments. In general, the player was just as confused as Gordon. What had happened and how long had passed? As Gordon wandered the streets of this bleak dystopian city, he saw those who refused to comply brutally beaten and dragged away as cremators wandered the streets and striders walked across the skyline. Gordon eventually came across Barney Calhoun, was guided to Dr. Kleiner's lab, and eventually reached the scrapyard of Eli Vance and Dog. This is where Gordon would learn about what had happened. Within this safe location, Gordon and Eli caught up. Eli had fought to survive for 10 years. However, from Gordon's perspective, he had worked with Eli just days before in Black Mesa. To explain to Gordon, and in turn the player, what had happened in their absence, Eli had put together a slideshow briefing to give his new visitor a first-hand view of the horrors that had occurred. As Eli powered up his slide projector, a flash of white appeared on a sheet he had hung onto the wall. "Let's see now. Where does this start?" he said. On the sheet, the projector offered an aerial view of Black Mesa from the sky, the inbound train that had taken Gordon to Sector C on the day of the incident, and finally, the test chamber itself, before the disaster had changed everything. Eli narrated over these images. He wished not to dwell on the events that had occurred during the Black Mesa incident. Everybody had a role to play that day, and each person had to accept some responsibility for what had happened. Nobody blamed Gordon. What mattered now was what came after the disaster and how they could work together to rectify it. Although Gordon had defeated the Nylanth, the ripples of this disaster continued to spread, not just through Black Mesa, but across the entire planet. Headcrabs suddenly found themselves pulled from Zen and into mundane locations. Shoppers in supermarkets fled as these creatures leapt at them from the shelves. Families were chased from their homes as bull squids materialized in their living rooms. Outside, packs of houndai roamed the streets and hunted down the population. No one was safe, regardless of where they lived or what kind of lifestyle they had. A farmer was shown fleeing his field as a gargantua overturned his tractor, while in another part of the world, an ichthyosaur suddenly appeared in a public pool just as children jumped from the high dive above. The countryside, the suburbs, all of those hard-to-patrol places became uninhabitable, so the scared population turned to their closest cities for protection. The world had been invaded by the very creatures the personnel of Black Mesa had fought to remove. There was an illusion of safety for a time. The citizens of these cities felt protected behind large fences with razor wire at the top of them. On guard towers, soldiers fired at headcrab zombies that attempted to breach this perimeter of safety. Yet, this would not help them against what was to come. In the most terrifying and confusing moments of what had happened so far, all across the planet, all at the same time, a large chunk disappeared from the center of each city. The buildings or people that had once stood where these giant holes had appeared were simply gone. Horrific photographs showed the moment this had happened as those on the edges of these pits fell into them. They would, however, never reach the bottom. Moments after these giant holes had been created, giant towers materialized within each of them, phasing anything that had fallen into the pits out of existence. Eli called these structures citadels, each one a headquarter for their new masters, the Combine. This was Invasion Central. You could say that those who died during the arrival of the citadels were the lucky ones, as this odd sequence of events turned into a full-blown invasion. From the citadels flooded the Combine's army. Cremators and Striders took to the ground as dropships tore through the skies. Of course, humanity resisted with their armies, but they were nothing in comparison to this alien force. The leaders of each nation sent their soldiers and tanks to attack each citadel, only to be reduced to ashes. For the next 7 hours, Earth put up as much of a fight as they could, but the Combine not only had more units, but they also knew exactly where to strike humanity. One location was the Pentagon, the nerve center of the United States Armed Forces. Just like the soldiers and tanks that had marched upon the citadels, it too was reduced to a pile of ashes. As the 7th hour approached, one man appeared and, in Eli's words, seized about all the power a man can seize in a crisis. With this power, the consul made his way to a radio tower, and as he wore a headset, he raised his hands to the dropships above and proclaimed Earth's surrender. This stopped the war. However, this was just the beginning of a new oppressed way of life for humanity. As for the man who had brokered this deal, it appeared that everything had worked out for him. He was chosen to speak for the Combine to relay their orders. He shared in their power. Eli explained that as the years passed of Combine occupation, they adapted the world. Combine-controlled settlements were set up to house the newly acquired species. City 17 was one of them, a scared population constantly monitored. The air exchange, an atmospheric reprocessor, was constructed. This place converted Earth's air into a noxious, murky gas. This is why the citizens had to wear masks in order to breathe. The Combine, of course, never explained why they had implemented this, and as a result, theories were thrown about. One suggested that the air exchange had been constructed to suck out Earth's atmosphere in order to operate dimensional turbines for other Combine-controlled planets. Another and more likely suggested that this was just a part of the plan to make this planet habitable for Combine units, more specifically, the Combine Advisor. Regardless, there was nothing humanity could do at this point to stop it. Alongside this, Eli showed images of drained seabeds and beached ships and giant whale bones. The oceans had been drained, just another one of Earth's natural resources that the Combine had stripped away. Were they attempting to make this planet a new home for their species, or were they stripping every resource they could from the planet before they moved on? As the slideshow came to an end, Eli told Gordon that despite everything they had seen or what they could speculate about, what he and the Resistance did know was that they had to stop them, and that is where Gordon came in. Mr. Freeman, it's up to you. This was the end of the slideshow briefing, and the projector went dark. Half-Life 2 Raising the Bar offers us a fascinating insight into the development of the whole game. By the note on the slideshow briefing, Mark Laidlaw states that in early versions of the Half-Life 2 script, Eli Vance subjected Gordon to a slideshow that serves to flesh out the lost time between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. This simple line tells us quite a bit. The first, pretty obvious, that this was a convenient way for Valve to explain why the world had changed so drastically in a pretty engaging way. The second, that by this point in the development, Eli Maxwell and Captain Vance had been merged into one character. I will cover both of them at some point. My reason for bringing this up is that so many changes were made during these early stages. Each one had a knock-on effect on another part of the game. Just imagine how many other features like this could have existed. The slideshow briefing, in my opinion, was the perfect way to be told how the Combine had invaded, accompanied by the terror in the images of the slideshow. A kid jumping off of a high dive into the mouth of an ichthyosaur. That is brutal. Alongside this, the briefing would have explained the oddities we, as the player, would have experienced after our arrival in City 17. This would have set up who the enemy was, and even a location for Gordon to visit. In the beta, the air exchange was the original Nova Prospect. Not that it was a prison, but that when Gordon had taken it down, this action would have triggered the uprising. I am genuinely sad we did not get this slideshow. The 7-Hour War is an event we all want to know more about, and the slideshow briefing would have given us a first-person view of it. Mark also stated that I was really hoping that by describing these scenes, I could trick Zabi Eng, the conceptual artist, into painting them. Sadly, it never came to be. As of now, a lot of the information in this briefing was obviously changed. We see the Citadel being constructed in City 17 in Half-Life Alyx, so the population did not have to experience the terrifying arrival of the Citadels. The air exchange was also cut, and the cremators did not make it into the game. We do have a head in a jar in Eli Vance's lab, but that is all we have of them. The slideshow briefing in Eli Vance's scrapyard would have given us, the confused player, the vital information we needed to understand what had happened in our absence. We were in exactly the same position as Gordon. In a sense, during the development of Half-Life 2, we too were in stasis with him, blind to what had happened. And we would have experienced that unsettling terror as he learned what had happened to his planet. Oh man, that engineer video last week took it out of me. For this week, I wanted to cover something interesting that would be less intensive on the brain. Half-Life 2 Raising the Bar is full of so many gems like the slideshow. It really gives an insight into the Combine, how they conquered, and the aftermath it had on the world. Sure, you can see this in the landscape and small details in the world, but a slideshow shown by Eli in his secret scrapyard is something else. Just imagine this scenario. You are sitting in your living room watching TV or playing Team Fortress on your PC in your bedroom, and suddenly, a bull squid appears out of nowhere. You do not have a crowbar in sight, so all you can do is flee, only to encounter a pack of houndai in the street. You flee to a city, and when you feel safe for that very small amount of time, you watch in horror as a huge chunk of ground disappears only to be replaced by a tower, which instantly sends out alien units to conquer. It would have been the perfect way to describe even a short amount of time of the 7-hour war. I am genuinely gutted that we did not get this. It was also the perfect way to fill in those plot points that we were missing in Half-Life 2. I have rambled on for long enough now. This was the lore and story behind the cut slideshow briefing. If you enjoyed this, then please leave a like, drop a comment below, and even share it with another Half-Life fan. If you disagreed or genuinely disliked this, then also let me know in the comments and leave a dislike. I appreciate you watching regardless of how you felt about it. Subscribe for more content like this too. As usual, I would like to thank my amazing gold tier patrons and channel members who got access to this video a little bit early. Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Chicken Guy 791, Ruben Mendoza, Duke, Toadnut, Orin X, Azu, Karatana, AJ, Verona, Comfy, and BG Games. The best resistance fighters you could ask for. Now, what did you think of this lore? Would you have liked to experience the slideshow briefing? And what was the scariest part for you? For me, it was the arrival of the Citadels. This is where our story ends. Check back next week for a new one.